And now, what measures can we take in the right direction other than the radical measures which in my book I propose we adopt to reform the system? More than anything, when you are in the middle of a storm at night, lost at sea, it is important to at least see a light in the distance, or have a compass to show you the way. As economic theorists at the university, we should always be familiar with the reform which, once and for all, would end economic cycles. You know what I'm talking about. I have repeated it again and again. First, we must re-establish general legal principles, and banks must operate as very respectable ones, like the Bank of Amsterdam have done in the past. Private banks must maintain a 100% reserve ratio. Second, we must eliminate all central banks, the only remaining central planning agencies in the market economy. This would be the culmination of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Central bankers insist on setting the interest rate and the money supply by decree. The thousands of public officials who currently work for the central bank should start working to serve consumers. This alone would raise the GDP significantly, and on top of that, the harm being done would cease. And third, we must privatize the monetary base. Let us not place our trust in the state to provide it, nor in reform programs, which, though they point in the right direction, continue to include fiduciary money. Maurice Allay's proposal is one example. The power to issue money is extremely tempting, and it is almost impossible to imagine the authorities not abusing that power. Therefore, we need to return to an entirely private monetary base, like the one that was expropriated. We need to return to the currency the market has spontaneously chosen for centuries, namely gold, and permit the process of free and private monetary development to continue where governments have carried out their violent expropriation. This is the necessary reform. However, all of the analysis we do at the university and study in my book is very useful to practically minded people as well. No doubt about it. On page 7 of my paper, you will find a table, and on the left we read Ideal Monetary Model, and on the right, Very Timid Measures in the Right Direction. These are measures which could be applied in our current institutional framework. They would reflect a half-hearted effort, but one in the right direction. Well, the first item on the left is a pure gold standard. What characterizes a pure gold standard? A rigid monetary base and slow growth. Less than 2% per year. Well, if you are Mr. Jean-Claude Trichet or Mr. Mario Draghi and his council, and you need to set an objective for monetary growth, at least set it close to what the rate for gold would be, 2% per year, and stick to that. Do not repeat what has happened in past years when an objective of 4.5% for growth in M3 was set, and the European Central Bank failed to achieve it. For several years, growth reached 5, 6, 7%. Therefore, central bank authorities can be guided at least by the goal of truly controlling the money supply, and not allowing its growth to exceed 2%. They can also raise interest rates in time. The second item is a 100% reserve requirement. What does such a requirement prevent? It prevents bank crises, because the money is there, and people can withdraw it whenever they wish. Also, a 100% reserve requirement permits a proper adjustment between investment and saving. Well, the central bank can provide the liquidity necessary when people lose confidence and go to withdraw their money, only to find it gone. This is what we have seen in the bailout. By sustaining the banking system and preventing its collapse, the central bank acts as a substitute, albeit a poor one, for a 100% reserve. However, the most important feature of the whole ideal system we propose, and this is the third item in the table, is that it permits the best adjustment humanly possible between genuine prior saving and investment. What has been deposited is not lent, and the business of providing liquidity, which involves cashier services, the extraction of money and so on, is totally distinct from the business of financial intermediation. A measure which approximates this ideal is clearly the measure the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933 introduced, the radical separation between commercial and investment banking. And here I get rather nervous, because my colleagues of the Chicago School, who supposedly defend the free market, have never grasped the nature of a market economy. The importance of a completely free market is explained both by Hayek in his book Monetary Nationalism and International Stability, and by Mises ad nauseam. It also lay at the root of Mises's falling out with Maklub, his beloved disciple. Until we have the ideal system, a system much closer to it would be one of fixed exchange rates that restricts the monetary policy of governments and prevents authorities from doing whatever they wish. This would be vastly preferable to a chaotic system of flexible currencies and exchange rates, with unfair competition and everyone rushing to see who is fueling inflation the most to gain a competitive advantage over everyone else. In fact, it is hard to believe that people as distinguished as Milton Friedman have had such a precarious knowledge of market processes that they have even defended flexible exchange rates. And in that monetary environment, it is hard to believe that people as distinguished as the members of the Chicago School actually asserted, near the end of Ronald Reagan's presidency, and particularly during Bill Clinton's, that the free market called for financial deregulation. Come on! How could that be? How could a free market call for financial deregulation? What the free market calls for is the disappearance of the central bank, the privatization of money, the establishment of a gold standard, and universal compliance with a 100% reserve requirement. But until these things happen, the free market calls for regulations that at least simulate, as far as possible, the results of this reform. This assertion is just as absurd as saying, "I am a libertarian. People should be able to do whatever they want to in the street." But that is nonsense. So, one person should drive this way and another that way, and salespeople passing through should set up shop in front of your house if they want to? Definitely not. In a free market, the street would be the property of an owners' association. And do you think the owners' association would let in just anyone who wished to come in? Would today's vagrant be allowed to sleep in your doorway? Streets would be privately regulated. And Walter Block elaborates on this in his book, The Privatization of Roads and Highways. Block explains that if these were private, there would be much less pollution, less noise, fewer accidents and so on. There would be private regulations, and these would be quite stringent. And although we may be behind a veil of ignorance, and we may not know how the market would regulate this area, we already have plenty of signs to indicate which regulations point in the right direction. And what definitely was a tragedy for the whole civilized world was the removal of the radical separation between commercial banking, which provides liquidity and very short-term loans, and consists of boring banks, the ones that lend at 5% and close at 5 p.m., and investment banking, the Wall Street boys with their financial engineering. These two must be separate, and we are victims of the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933 under the pretext of financial deregulation. Above all, we are victims as lovers of the free market, because now the enemies of the market attack us with the question, "Now do you see that the market does not work? Do you see that deregulation has ruined everything?" In any case, with friends like the Chicago School theorists, we defenders and lovers of liberty certainly need no enemies. Thank you all very much.
Muchas gracias a todos.